Okay, it's 11:02. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm just going to kick off today's final part of our day-to-day webinar series. Basically, the series is built to be quick, impactful, insightful, with quick wins for you to take back home or take back to a company to easily implement. And the whole point of the series is to basically give you ideas to be more productive, more proactive in how we're using our data, and ultimately help organizations reduce risk in the way that they're using their data in their systems. This last episode will be covering external or public data for better risk management. Now, there is just so many external data sources that we can connect to, things like regulatory data, markets data, your Reuters, your Bloombergs, these guys. There is your telematics information. There's even information on human emotions nowadays. I know, we also have another solution called Brandwatch, and it can pick up whenever your company's picture pops up on an image posted by any civilian, wherever it goes, that you can see your share of voice or your total brand reach as well. So really a lot of external data that can be pulled into organizations to either enhance our decision-making or reduce risks overall, which is what this is about. I'll also get into about how companies have capitalized on external data sources and linking it back to their own internal systems. So whether it is to know your customer better or add real-time context to decision-making, there is a huge opportunity for organizations to use your external data sources and link it back into your environment if it's something you're interested in. So some new faces, some people have joined us throughout the entire series. For those of you who do know us, for those of you don't know us and it's your first time seeing us, basically where technologies fits into the picture is there are 15,000 MarTech and data solutions available globally. And our job is to find the best ones and make them available to the local African market, basically with local support, consultation, platform billing in local currencies, regulations such as BEE and understanding POPI and these kind of things. So bringing local context to international technology. A little bit about me. My name is Alex. I'll be your host for today's session. I'm the product lead at Technologies for two solutions, one called Domo, which I'll go in likely at the end of the session. It's an end-to-end data platform. And then Khoros, which is an enterprise digital engagement solution. I have a bunch of experience in the fintech space as well as customer experience. Very excited for all of you to be joining us today. Thank you for those who came. Right. I do have Rain, our marketing manager, who's assisting. If you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to pop your message in the chat or reach out to us after. Thank you. So when we look at this, there's massive opportunity to bring all these external and public data sources into our internal environment. But it's really important because companies try and rush in and try and pick up key trends right away, or try and identify correlations right off the bat. But it is important to understand that correlation doesn't always mean causation. There's not always that cause and effect between variables that may seem like they are linked. So when we are pulling in this external data, it's really to bring in additional context to our decision making. And also account for variables which we may not be measuring in our platforms, but I'll show you that in a little bit. There are ways that you can calculate and pick up correlations, such as Pearson's coefficient correlation calculation. I'm not going to get too much into that, but basically looking at the strength of a relationship between two variables, trying to see if there is a causal relationship between them or not. If variable A moves by X amount, variable B moves by directly proportional, inversely proportional relation or strength to the initial variable. So I'm just going to quickly jump out of this presentation to give you an example of correlation is not always causation. Rain just popped the link in the chat It is a fun website if you want to check it out after this. So this is a good example. I just zoomed in here, and this is the Zimmer Biomet Holdings stock price. You see the red line. This is 20 years worth of data, and the red line has slowly increased. Great stock, fantastic. But then we also see this black line moving at, I would say, a correlated manner. They're moving together, they've increased. It's 20 years worth of data. And if I were to see this, I'd say, what is that black line? It's clearly correlating to the stock price. If I'm looking at investment strategies, I want to dive into this. I need to understand what this other factor is, because it seems like there's a relationship there. But this isn't always the case, right? So if I zoom out here, it's actually popularity of the first name Bo. So we look at the data at a glance, and it's clear that there is a correlation. But what isn't taken into account here is confounding variables. Also, there's things we need to be careful of. Does it make sense to measure them against one another? If I were just to see a snapshot of that, I would say I really need to know what that black line is. But zooming out, understanding a bit about the data, a bit about the context, it maybe doesn't make sense to measure it against the stock price, but there is a correlation, and it's these kind of things that we need to be a little bit cautious of. Another fun thing of this website is it gives you a little AI write-up. So it's a little known fact that every time a baby was named Bo, a tiny but powerful wave of good luck was unwittingly released into the universe, ultimately leading to a series of fortunate events for Zimmer Biomet Holdings. This positive energy created a ripple effect, subtly influencing the stock price and leaving everyone wondering, what's in the name? Apparently, a surprisingly solid investment strategy. If my financial advisor based my investments off of that, that is one Hail Mary of a guess. Kudos to them who got that right. But then the ones that are, logic kind of, maybe it makes sense to us. Maybe it's worth looking deeper into it. Cigarette smoking rate of US adults correlates with arson in the United States. I don't think that there is enough to say that there is a direct relationship. Maybe it's worth us now jumping into these correlations and saying, uncovering, the different factors that may go into it. There are tests that we can do to see if our correlations and our measurement of such makes sense with our test sample and the variables we are measuring. So it's so important to identify the correlations. Correlations sometimes do lead where there's smoke, there's US smokers, and when there's US smokers, there's apparently fires, Cammy. Where they can maybe lead to causation. Maybe there is a cause and effect, but how do we dive deeper into this? So it's not to say that correlations don't lead to causation. Sometimes there actually is a cause and effect behind either key trends, spikes in our sales numbers, or historic data. So it's just always important to, first of all, approach a bit unassumingly when looking at correlations. Let's do the tests, let's first model it and identify whether it is something for us to either capitalize on, or maybe it is something we've seen as a key risk. I'll give you an example of a company that monetized on basically linking external data. They used weather data, which was Walmart in the States. In the early 2000s, there was Hurricane Harry, I think, heading towards Florida, going through the Atlantic coast. And their chief information officer at the time, Miss Dillman, was a CIO, pressed their team to basically look into all the historic data, look at the consumer behavior, what prices maybe spiked, but specifically just before a hurricane. So they identified, these adverse weather patterns coming in, obviously a hurricane, pulled that data in and then layered it with their historic sales data to try and see maybe some items had higher sales figures than the others, or maybe they weren't. Then this was the forefront of technology in the early 2000s, and it was an opportunity for them to test their super weapon called predictive technology. And what they found was that there were actually sales spikes in certain items. And sometimes we have logic dictate or kind of guide us, or we have opinions that kind of skew maybe where we need to go, but really it's guessing at that point. But using data, what they found was, there were increases. Strawberry Pop-Tarts, surprising enough, a 7 times increase in sales for strawberry Pop-Tarts right before a hurricane. And the most sold item before a hurricane was beer, especially in Florida. Without this data, they never actually knew that strawberry Pop-Tarts increase in sales as much. So now every single time that they're predicting a hurricane coming in, they send trucks to specifically stock up on these 2 items. And in the early 2000s, when they first started this, they actually saw that these 2 items sold extremely quickly right before a hurricane, 7 times more for strawberry Pop-Tarts than any time of the year or before any other events, but specifically for hurricanes. This is what they saw. So bringing in that external data to bring real-time context to decision-making, their stock planning, their sales, even linking it back to marketing, to market these products, saying, hey, listen, these guys have it, come jump in. So really looking at monetizing and taking advantage or capitalizing on certain scenarios that may be impacting the business. The next example is a company that uses external data to reduce risk. They are called Falvey Insurance. This is a case study from Domo, actually. Rain will put the link in the chat if you'd like to look at the whole case study on how they use Domo and the way they use their weather data to support proactively addressing risks that are coming up. So what Falvey Insurance does is there's obviously your ships going around, taking goods all over the world, and they do the insurance for these ships as well as warehousing, all this. They specialize in insurance in that. And one of their biggest concerns was the weather. I think locally this is becoming more applicable when we're seeing those storms happening in KZN and other areas of the country. So I don't think this is too far off from actually adding a lot of context to local organizations. So what they use this data for is, again, looking at hurricanes. That's 2 hurricanes, apologies. But looking at hurricanes, seeing which ships will either be directly in the route of a hurricane, divert the ships so they don't lose any cargo off the back of it. They also identified a unique opportunity to support their clients. Is they figured out most clients don't actually realize where their stock is warehoused, where it's sitting, what stock is where, and they would do a proactive loss prevention consultation, speak to their clients and say, listen, this is what's going to happen. It's going to impact your sales. It's going to impact your stock on hand. We have covered you. You are covered for this, but it's an inconvenience of having to replace it, go through refund, blah, blah, blah. So they did these consultations and actually moved stock to warehouses for clients, advise that they do it. So obviously, first of all, Falvey doesn't have to pay out. They've reduced their risk there. They've increased their bottom line. And they've helped their clients out. So supporting with customer retention and really fostering those relationships there. Which I think is important, so there's not just reducing risk, but it's reducing risk for everyone that we can as well, if we're the ones with the information. I know a lot of us have cars, and if you're with Discovery, they send out a hail warning, please park your car inside. First of all, it helps me, I don't want to get my car dented up and then go through the schlep of taking it through to the panel beaters. So they will look at the weather data, proactively advise and notify all their clients of the areas that were impacted by hail, and then proactively engage with them and say, please park your cars somewhere safe. This is happening. Right. So I'll give you some examples of what modern data platforms allow you to connect. What I have seen that isn't in Domo, but people using Python pipelines, obviously bringing your Bloomberg, your financial data, your risk data, all these things, these forecasts by these consultancy agencies. But a lot of our modern data platforms actually have free connectors that we can leverage and pull into our environments. And maybe we build dashboards specifically around risk. So we have our own risk dashboard, whether it is weather. I think what an interesting use case is looking at sentiment, so scraping the internet for keywords during COVID and picking up any keywords that are associated with civil unrest and the rioting that was happening at that time. A lot of companies were impacted by it. Some kept a close eye on the news and planned and prepared. Some didn't, and they had a lot of stuff looted. So maybe it's even pulling all of that in, and when sentiment is at a negative level on these certain keywords, let's get prepared, maybe increase security, maybe move it to a more secure facility, and proactively address risks that are coming up. Maybe it's 1%, less than 1% chance of it happening, but when it does, yeah, it's impactful. So some ones that are available in Domo, which I found, there's one called Faraday. Faraday predicts consumer behavior, so they bring additional data and models, layer it over your sales data, whatever you allow them to, and yeah, basically from international benchmarking or local benchmarking, give you a prediction on consumer purchasing behaviors and these kind of things. There is geology data. I'm currently working with some mines, which is, sorry, I think it's under earthquake. If I can spell. So they can pull in the earthquake data or any publicly available earthquake data that's around the area if it's being monitored by the government. Pull that in, identify risks, have one centralized dashboard that's measuring it in real time, pulling it all through, and when it reaches a certain tremor level, pull the miners out of the mine shafts. It's very important that our management also has access into it in the BI platforms. I will just go through one or two, maybe they're a bit more relevant as well. There's COVID data. So we know that consumer behavior changes when there's pandemics. Maybe when it's flu season, what do people buy when there is a spike in flus or viruses or sicknesses or these things? So understanding our consumers better by layering this data, as well as that real-time context for our decision-making that I mentioned earlier. So really a lot of connectors available to us. And okay, of course, weather. And you can see it's all free. And we don't see enough organizations leveraging this kind of data in their BI platforms to reduce risk. Maybe they hear it in the newspaper, but the whole point is to plan and predict and proactively make decisions rather than waiting for it to happen. And we said we knew this was going to happen, and then it happened. Everyone's like, oh, shucks. It's just going to help us plan, prepare a bit better, and manage and reduce our risk a bit better moving forward if we start layering more and more of this data, especially on risk analysis, especially when we're trying to capitalize on certain scenarios, on customers buying their personas, all these things, which is it's really helpful. So yeah, that's all I really had to show for you today. I think where you can take it one step further is if you're pulling in markets data, if you're picking up any further information, where we can start analyzing it. So we're obviously running our tests, but this is quite a cool example of a what-if analysis. So what if, inflation increases by a certain propensity for our vendors? Well, we're gonna have to reduce vendor margin, or they're not going to hit their margins. The cost of them doing business is increasing, and we can't really do much about that. And then shipping naturally increases. So we can model based on what we're predicting, what we're seeing in the market, how much it's going to impact either our vendors, maybe how much it's going to impact our consumers at banks. So these what-if analyses are fantastic, prompted by that external data that we see. What if a hurricane's coming and we increase our strawberry Pop-Tarts margins by 10%? What do those figures look like? How will revenue increase based on consumer purchasing in the past? So take it one step further, start that analysis, identify those correlations, see if there is causation, and plan and predict, really. It's a nice little tool if not many of you have what if analysis is going. It's really a lot of fun for that data exploration side of things for us. So I did say in the beginning, this is Express. It is quick. If you have questions, please feel free to ask. But if we're looking at key takeaways, is take into account the confounding factors. The factors that we may not be measuring between our different variables, that they're directly impacting our dependent and independent variables that we're measuring here. This external data and public data is going to help us get real-time context, make better decisions, reduce risk, and capitalize on opportunities. And having a central repository for enhanced insights, so having it all in one space, like a modern data platform similar to Domo, which you can identify correlations, see if there is causation, and start building your models to analyze what would happen if we make certain decisions moving forward. It's all about using this data to be proactive and make the right decisions going forward. Yeah. So that's really what I had planned and prepared for you today. Are there any questions? I'm happy to take questions for the next few minutes until the end of the session, and give you answers of what we found.